All right, so we're 11th grade lit, and we will have this vocabulary due Wednesday, and you can put it on the board. And then there'll be a test on Walden before Christmas. I haven't scheduled it yet. You know, we have all week, but we'll be reading next week. And at the end of the period, we're gonna, if we get through, we're gonna have a journal, a third journal. They're really only, after this one, they're only 2 full chapters we're going to read. And then we're going, I mean, there are 10 pages each, and then we're gonna read part of the last chapter. That's really just a few paragraphs that conclude this. You'll get a sampling of what the book is about.
Can I get my water real quick?
Yeah. So let me pray for us. A lot going on. Again, if you want to do any of the decorating, I think most of the rooms will be. We don't want to be the only one that's not. It'll be 10. There's a schedule for it. I don't quite understand the schedule, but because I'm teaching 9th graders at 10 o'clock, but it says F period. Well, I guess everybody will go to F period. Anyway, sometime Monday morning, it looks like around 10 o'clock, they'll give you some time to do that. So, I mean, the time will be there, the manpower or woman power. We just have to have something, you know, have something. So if anybody could think of, you know, something to do, bring something, you know, we can get construction paper, not that, but the background paper, we can probably get that, but if you don't have it here, we're not gonna be able to do it. So, anyway, besides that, what can I pray for? Anything happening particularly, anybody? All right, let me pray. Father, thank you. We've gotten to the end of the week. We are still COVID-free, and we may not be COVID-free, but we're here, and we haven't been shut down yet. And so I just pray that doesn't happen. You know, it hadn't happened in a full quarter, and now 3 weeks, and we just pray we can continue to come back. We pray for the work we're going to do and focus. I love the fact that at Caldwell, you know, there are times to have fun, lots of times, lots of. Next week will be an example. Just about every day there's going to be something fun to do. But then when we're in class, you know, we work hard. And so we just pray that we'll be able to do that. I pray for the teachers who are, all of us, have more work to do than we have time to do it. I pray that you give us wisdom to use our time wisely to get it done. So thank you for this day. Pray that these students have churches to go to. That really matters. Doesn't make the news. It's not in the headlines, but that matters to you. And ultimately, we must answer to you. And so I just pray that you would bless that in Jesus' name. Amen. While we're reading about something else at the end of the class, if we get this far, I'll tell you the journal. I mean, to me, being an English teacher, a lit teacher. You know, it's like the best thing I could possibly write about. I don't know about yourself, but I'm going to ask you at the end of the period to write, because the next chapter we're going to read is called Reading. And so Thoreau takes about 9 or 10 pages, talks about the value of reading and what to read, and of course he has opinions about everything. So maybe to give you a heads up, I'm going to ask you to write at least 5 books down. List 5 books that have impacted your life in some way. It may have been, it's the first book you read. You know, it may have been a childhood book. I mean, it doesn't have to be a book you read at school, but, you know, we might say the Bible because you're supposed to. I would definitely say it, but, you know, I would later, when we get to this, and we may be Monday, but I would ask you to sort of analyze those books. What kind of impact did it make? They still say, you know, on the internet, you know, if you believe what's on the internet, that successful people, I'm not talking about literary people, college professors, but successful people across the board, people that run, they're CEOs of organizations, they read a lot. And maybe they don't read Thoreau, maybe they don't read Mary Shelley or poetry. We're not talking about just that kind of literature, but successful people, there is a pattern there, are readers. Now, are there things, because you just have to keep up, you have to keep expanding your knowledge of your subject, there's just things that you've got to read, so I would really encourage you, you may not now, I promise you, you will want your children to be readers. About 15 years, 20 years from now, at some point when they're in high school or something, you're gonna wish, I know I didn't like reading so much when I was a kid, but I want you to, because I know how good it is for you. And it's gonna kind of be a weak argument if you say, well, Dad, if you didn't do it, why should I do it? And you say, because I learned from my mistake. I mean, that's one of the things, I don't know if anybody as a parent would say, no, I don't want my children to read, and I wish I hadn't read as much as I did. I just read too much. I've never heard anybody say that. But when you're in the middle of it, it's harder to see the value. So anyway, that's where we're headed. We have answered the first 7 questions here. We just have a few more, and so we're on page 74. I'm going to start. And I like, we finished yesterday talking about the morning, why he likes it, and you wrote down a quote. That would be number 7. And I think that's really practical. A lot of what Thoreau says we think is really idealistic, and do you have any?
There's 2 left.
If you can grab, see those
All right.
there on the corner, if you need some more, just put them out anyway. But I think this advice about morning, I've always been told that. I think a couple of you said, Jackson said you were a morning person, and I used to wish I could get up in the morning and work out. And I've never been good at that, but I have gotten up in the morning and been productive, but it seems to me that would be a great time to have a workout, have a run. Let me read it. We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake. Because he's talking about not just physically awake, but he's talking about mentally alert. He's talking about always something more than just physical. Because he believes the most important things in life aren't physical. They're metaphysical. They go beyond the physical. Not by mechanical aids, but by infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or carve a statue or make a few objects beautiful, but it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. To affect the quality of our day, that is the highest of arts. Every man is tasked to make his life, even its details, worthy of the contemplation of his most elevated and critical hour. That would have been a, poster-worthy quote there. Every man is tasked to make his life, even in its details, worthy of the contemplation of his most elevated and critical hour. If we refused, or rather used up such paltry information as we get, the oracles would distinctly inform us how this might be done. So he's always trying to get us to a higher point. Ryan, would you start? I went to the woods. This will be answered. This is one of the questions I'll ask you on any test, because he answers it here as clearly as possible. Why did he spend 2 years and 2 months in the woods? And he's going to explain it right here. Yeah. Page 74. You can go ahead, Ryan.
I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, confront only the essential facts of life, and see if I could learn what I had to teach, and not when to die, discover what I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life, living instead of dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole genuine meanness of it, and publish its meaningness to the world. Or if sublime to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it in my next exertion. For most men, it appears to me, are in a strange uncertainty about it, whether it is of the devil or of God, and of something hastily concluded that is the chief in man here to glorify and enjoy him forever.
See, it's a statement like that that makes me wonder whether Thoreau is a Christian, because that is the first question in one of the catechisms. It's what's the purpose of life? Every person on earth is going to confront that at some point. I was reading it this morning in Isaiah. You know, he made man to glorify himself. To me, if you don't understand that, how could you? What would be the point of living? Otherwise, there is no meaning as big as that. That is the biggest, highest thing you could live for. It was actually what we were made to live for, is to glorify God in our lives. And you will meet a lot of people, if you haven't already, in college, and that they don't really know what life, the purpose of life is. They're still looking for it. And I hope you'll throw up your hands and say, well, if you want to know, I found it. I can tell you what it is. They will challenge you on it, but I think you'll be prepared for that. So he says that's a hasty conclusion, to live to glorify God and enjoy him forever. So, or maybe he's saying people say it but don't understand what it means. So anyway, why did he go? Write it down. Hey, write a precise sentence. You can pull out one sentence from an entire sentence. The first sentence will work. And I want you to quote it exactly, so there'll be no question about what he means. This is for question number 8. Somebody want to read that sentence? Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
He went to the woods to confront the essential facts of life to see if he could not learn what it had to teach, and not when he comes to die discover that he had not lived, and he wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life.
Anybody want to explain what he means by that? Thank you. That's good. Yeah, probably.
Basically, you just want to experience like all the wilderness, just like what it has to offer, just without any distractions. Learn just what, like, I don't know, just what's out there.
Good. That's a good interpret. What does he mean when he says to live deliberately? I think you said it. What would that mean?
Deliberate.
Yeah, when he says to live deliberately, you actually said it. You said not to be distracted. But I think that's a part of it.
Just like focus on what's out there, just like nothing else, just soak it all up.
What does a jury do when they go into the jury room? They deliberate. So what do they do when they deliberate?
Discuss.
Yeah. Frank, try to stay with us here. Of course, you've never served on a jury. I have a couple of times, and that's a sacred thing. You can decide anything as long as all 10 of you or 12 of you make the decision, and it has to be unanimous. So if all 12 of you decide he's guilty, he's guilty. Now, it can be appealed, I think, if it's so outrageous. Remember, To Kill a Mockingbird, Tom Robinson, they said he was guilty of attacking that woman, and it was clear by the evidence he wasn't. They were biased, so they were going to appeal it. But you are in charge at that point, and that's how he wants to live life. We talked about it, we asked questions, we spent several hours. You know, we just didn't come to a hasty conclusion. He said, that's how he wants to live life. I think a lot of people might say, well, you never get anything done if you deliberated about every single thing that you did. To me, that's a good argument. If sometimes we just have to do stuff, you know, we can't ponder it forever. But he's talking about the essential things. So, Lillian, he goes on, all this that we're reading now, you will see again in your life. These are statements that are so famous, so well written that, and they summarize the whole philosophy. On the test, I'll ask you, what is his philosophy? Well, all this is a part of his philosophy. Yeah, and you don't have to read it all if you want to share some of it with James.
Off of 25.
Yes, 75. Still we live.
Still we live mainly like ants, though the fable tells us that we were long ago changed into men. Like pygmies, we fight with cranes. It is error upon error and cloud upon cloud, and our best virtue has forced occasion of superfluous and inevitable wretchedness. Our life was frittered away by detail. An honest man has hardly need to count more than his 10 fingers, or in extreme cases he may add his 10 toes and lump the rest. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. I say, like, let your affairs be as 2 or 3, and not 100 or 1,000. Instead of 1,000,000, count half a dozen, and keep your accounts on your thumbnail.
Before she goes on, would you bracket that, all of that she just read, starting with still we live meanly, down to the statement, keep your accounts on your thumbnail? That again really summarizes his philosophy of life. To simplify things, that one word in some ways does it best. What does he mean we still live meanly like ants? Our life is frittered away by details. Yes,
We live to work and things like that.
we live to work.
Yeah.
And he would argue we spend so much time on unnecessary things. Now, he's a grown man. I don't think at your age you're quite, I wasn't, able to decide what's a wasted detail that I don't need to be worried about and what's not. I don't think it's fair for someone who's too young to be able to say, yeah, this is a waste of my time. Because you don't know. Everything is equal. You know, I don't know if this is as important as, but sometime in your life, you'll need to make those decisions. This is a waste of time. I don't want to do this. Because you have the authority to do it. Nobody can tell you otherwise. Would you mind keeping reading?
In the midst of this chopping sea of civil life, such are the clouds and storms and quicksands and thousands unwarned, and items to be allowed, for that a man has to live, if he would not founder it, or go to the bottom and not make his port at all. By dead reckoning, and he must be a great calculator, indeed who succeeds. Simplify, simplify. Instead of 3 meals a day, if it be necessary, eat but one. Instead of 100 dishes, 5. And
have sleepers and forge rails and devote days and nights to the work that go to tinkering upon our lives to improve them. Who will build railroads? And if railroads are not built, how shall we get to heaven in season? If we stay at home and mind our business, who will want railroads? We do not ride on the railroads. They rides upon us.
What do you think he means by that before you go on? We don't ride on the railroads ride on us.
We're the one who built the railroads.
What?
Humans are the one who built them.
Yes, that's for sure.
And, they also rely on us for upkeep. 'Cause if
Right.
we didn't service them, they would just.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned this example. Have you ever heard somebody say, when you see a man and his dog or a woman and his dog, and the expression, who's taking who for a walk? You know, you wonder, is the dog taking the man for a walk? It looks more like that's what's going on because the dog seems to be in charge. Same thing about your cell phones. Who's running, you know, are you in charge of your cell phone, or do you answer, salute, whenever it calls? Literally calls, that's what we go, you gotta call. We answer, we look at it, we don't ignore it. We're so trained by the cell phone that it's telling us, stop what you're doing and look at me. I've got something for you. He would think that's ridiculous. That if who's in charge of the cell phone, you or the cell phone, or Google? You know, they are a lot of determining what you watch. They're subconsciously and consciously kind of molding the things you like. Yeah.
Is it okay if I go to that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought you had a comment about this.
I mean, if you want to, I can think of one.
Would you keep reading?
Did you ever think those sleepers are not underlined about them? Each one is a man, an Irishman or a Yankee man, and yet the rails are laid on them, and they're covered with sand and the walls are covered with others. They are sound sleepers, I assure you, and every few years a new lot is laid down and run over, so that if some have the pleasure of riding on a rail, others have the misfortune to be ridden upon. And when they run over a man that is walking in his sleep, a supernumerary sleeper in the wrong position, and wake him up. They suddenly stop the cars and make a hue and cry about it, as if this were an exception. I'm glad to know that it takes a gang of men for every 5 miles to keep the sleepers down and level in their beds as it is, for this is a sign that they may have some time get up again.
Thanks.
Why should we live with such hurrying ways of life? We are determined to be starved before we are hungry. Men say that a stitch in time saves 9, and so they take 1,000 stitches today to save 9 tomorrow. As for work, we haven't any of any consequence. We have the same that is dance and not possibly keep our heads still. If I should only give it a few pulls at the parish bell rope, as for a fire that is without setting a bell, there is hardly a man on his farm in the outskirts of Concord, notwithstanding that press of engagements which was visited so many times this morning, nor boy nor woman, I am unable to say, but would forsake all and follow that sound. Not mainly to save from the flames, but if we will be close to truth, much more to see it burn since burn it must, and we be it known, not set it on fire, but to see it put out, and have a hand in it. If that is done as handsomely, yes, even if it were the parish church itself, hardly a man takes a half-hour's nap after dinner, but when he wakes, he holds up his head and asks, what's the news? As if the rest of mankind had sensibles. Some give directions to be awake every half hour, doubtless for no other purpose, and then to pay for it, they tell what they have to. After another study, the news is as indispensable as the breakfast. Pray tell me anything new that has happened to a man anywhere on the globe. And he reads it over his coffee and rolls that a man has had his eyes gouged out this morning on the Mosquito River, never dreaming the while that he lives in the dark of this world, and is but the rudiment of an iron solid.
Again, he's speaking right to us. He's talking about when he had newspapers and that sort of thing. But again, do you have the willpower to ignore your cell phone? Do you have your willpower to ignore some friend somewhere that is texting you, talking to you? Can you do that? Or, so who's really in charge, you or the cell phone? That's kind of the question, and you may be good with that, but Thoreau is trying to point, you know, there's maybe something wrong with that. Jeff?
For my part.
You can share this with Harley too, you don't have to read all of it.
Okay. For my part, I could easily do without the post office. I think that there are very few important communications made through it. To speak critically, I never received more than 1 or 2 letters in my life. I wrote this some years ago that were worth the posting. The penny post is commonly an institution through which you seriously offer a man half a penny for his thoughts, which is so often safely offered in jest. And I am sure that I never read any memorable news in a newspaper. If we read of one man robbed or murdered or killed by accident, or one house burned, or one vessel wrecked, or one steam stove blown up, or one cow run over the Western Railroad, or one mad dog killed, or one lot of grasshoppers in the winter, we never need read of another. One is enough. You are acquainted with the principle. What do you care for a myriad instances and applications? To the philosopher, all news, as it is called, is gossip. And they who edit and read it are old women over their teeth.
Okay, pause just a minute, look at question number 9. What does he mean that to a philosopher, all news is gossip? First of all, what's gossip?
It's talking bad about someone else.
What, isn't there any good gossip? Does anybody ever gossip good things?
Yeah.
No, I don't think they do either. You don't think of gossip as being doing, why is that? If you're talking behind somebody's back and you're sharing something, did you hear so-and-so made 110 on that test? I don't know if it's true, you know, did you hear that person made a 40? Then we get interested, whether it's true or not. But have you ever heard good gossip, like, this really good thing has happened, yeah?
Well, maybe they're like gossiping, like exposing something bad that happened, so they can like bring it to justice or something.
That's a good way to look at it, but it seems like gossip is always negative. What's wrong with it? I was expecting an answer. That made me think there's something coming on the other end of it.
Yeah, how gossip usually you see it as bad. That
So why?
means
What's wrong with it?
Because most of the
that
time
people-
gossip isn't.
That people want to talk, that people would rather talk bad about people behind their back than actually, support them and talk good behind their back.
Well, my question is,
Says how-
what harm can that possibly do? Yeah, what harm could God, it's always universally considered bad, don't do it. Seem like I would like to know what's bad about it. How could it hurt anybody? Yeah.
You could spread misinformation.
I'm just gonna play the devil's advocate. What's wrong with that?
Well, if you're, what's lying, if you're spreading information that's not true, it could inform decisions that would lead to negative outcomes.
It could hurt people's reputation. What were you gonna say?
That would be fine.
So, yeah,
It's basically a form of bullying in
Thanks.
certain ways.
one more time.
It's basically a form of bullying in some ways.
I agree. Explain how.
Well, I think it's just, it could also go along with misinformation, because, you basically just be judging them for something, you don't even know what's really going on with them. And so you can basically just be saying things that aren't true about them and just really bringing them down. And also, even just bringing them down, they don't even know about it, so it's just another.
It's almost the kind of thing, we don't even need to have this conversation, except that's what Thoreau forces us to do. Talk about things we think we already know. We all agree that it's bad because it's, like you said, it's like physical bullying, except it's emotional. And now that we have the internet, you can really hurt people that way. He's saying news is like that. He's comparing news. So-and-so got killed in Greensboro last night. And he makes the comment, and we're answering number 9, or at least you should if you haven't. He's saying that if you've ever read one time that somebody got killed, then you never have to read it again, because it's a general principle, people die. Now, it seems to me if that's somebody you know, that changes it completely. You know, if it's your friend or somebody that you are aware of, then it matters too. Yeah.
Well, doesn't it matter, like, if somebody murdered somebody and they put, like, his face in the news, so, like, if anybody sees him, they could be like, oh, this guy murdered that guy.
That makes sense to me, sure does. All right, Hartley.
Yet not a few are greedy after gossip. There was such a rush, as I heard the other day at one of the offices, to learn the foreign news by the last arrival, that several large squares of glass belonging to the establishment were broken by the pressure. News which I seriously think a ready wit might write a 12-month or 12 years beforehand with sufficient accuracy. As for Spain, for instance, if you know how to throw in Don Carlos and the Infanta and Don Pedro and Isabel and Granada from time to time in the right proportions, they may have changed the names a little since I saw the papers, and they may have changed the names and served up a bullfight when other entertainments fail. It will be true to the letter and give us a good idea of the exact state or ruin of things in Spain, as the most
Succinct.
and lucid reports under this head in the newspapers. And as for England, almost the last significant scrap of news from the quarter was the revolution of 1649. And if you have learned the history of her crops for an average year, you never need attend to that thing again, unless your speculations are of a merely pecuniary character. If one may judge who rarely looks into the newspaper, nothing new does ever happen in foreign parts, a French Revolution not excepted.
So let's skip this next paragraph and go to the one after that. We can answer the next question. Yeah, sure.
Gems and illusions are esteemed for sound as truths, while the reality is fabulous. If men would steadily observe realities only and not allow themselves to be deluded, life to compare it with such things as we know would be like a fairy tale in the Arabian Nights entertainments. If we respected only what is inevitable and has the right to be, music and poetry would respond along the streets. When we are unhurried and wise, we perceive that only great and worthy things have any permanent and absolute existence. That petty fears and petty pleasures are but the shadow of the reality. This is always exhilarating and sublime. By closing the eyes and slumbering, and consenting to be deceived by shows, men establish and confirm their daily life of routine and habit everywhere, which still is built on purely illusory foundations. Children who play life discern its true law and relations more clearly than men who fail to live it unworthily, but who think that they are wiser by experience, that is, by failure. I've read in a Hindu book that there was a king's son who, being expelled in infancy from his native city, was brought up by a forester. And growing up in maturity in that state, imagining himself to belong to the barbarous race with which he lived. One of his father's ministers have discovered him, revealed him to what he was, and the misconception of his character was removed. And he knew himself to be a prince. So soul, continues the Hindu philosopher, from the circumstance in which it is placed, mistakes its own character until the truth is revealed to it by some holy teacher, and then it knows itself to be Brahme.
Okay, you can stop there. The painter started, but you hear what he just said? Said a Hindu prince was raised by a forester. So he thought he was a forester. Nothing wrong with being a forester, but if you're a prince, it's kind of a step down in life. And so later in his life, he realizes all along you've been a prince. think of how his view of life changes. And I think that applies to believers. If you really understood you were a daughter, a child, a son of the King, that would dramatically change your view of who you are. You could never look in the mirror and talk badly about yourself. You would also be very upset with yourself because you didn't honor the King. But that's what he's talking about, reality, which is number 10. So why don't you pick it up there? I perceive that we
inhabitants of New England live this mean life that we do because our vision does not penetrate the surface of things.
We think that is which appears to be. If a man should talk through this town and see only the reality think you would the mill dam go to, if he should give us an account of the realities he beheld there. We should not recognize the place in his description. Look at a meeting house or a courthouse or a jail or a shop or a dwelling house and say what that thing really is before a true gaze. And they would all go to pieces in your account of them. Men esteem truth remote, in the outskirts of the system, behind the farthest star, before Adam and after the last man. In eternity there is indeed something true and sublime. But all these things and places and occasions are now and here. God himself culminates in the present moment and will never be more divine in the lapse of all the ages. And we are unable to apprehend at all what is sublime and noble only by the perpetual instilling and drenching of the reality that surrounds us. The universe constantly and obediently answers to our conceptions. Whether we travel fast or slow, the track is laid for us. Let us spend our lives in conceiving them. The poet or the artist never yet had so far and noble a design, but some of his posterity at least could accomplish.
So include this, thank you, include this in your answer to number 10. He says, we think, I'll read the sentence, we think that is which appears to be. In other words, we get appearances and reality mixed up. We think that the truth is in the appearances. And you know that's not the case. We don't go spend 2 years in the woods by ourselves to contemplate that. And yet we're constantly fooled by appearances. We still think that what appears to be true is true. And that's why he talks about eternity and God who don't change. Sarah, would you read? We're almost done here.
Let us spend one day as deliberate as nature and not be thrown off the track of every nutshell mosquito when it falls on the rails.
Okay, that's the next sentence. You're going to have to answer that, but she's going to keep reading. That's the next question.
Let us rise early and fast, or breakfast gently without
Perturbation.
Let company come and let company go. Let the bells ring and the children go with the stream. Let us not be upset or overwhelmed in that terrible, rapid, and whirlpool called a day. Sustain in the Meridian shallows. Whether it's danger, you are safe, for the rest of the way is downhill. With underlax nerves, with more vigor, sail by it. Let another way tie the mast like Ulysses. If the engine whistles, let it whistle till it's hoarse for its pain. If a wild wings, why should we run? We will consider what kind of music we are like. Let us settle ourselves and work the wedge of our feet downward. Through the mud and slush of the opinion and prejudice and tradition and delusions and appearance. That Olivia, which covers the globe. Through Paris and London, through New York and Boston and Concord, through church and state, through poetry and philosophy and religion, till we come to a hard bottom and rock in place, when we can call reality, and say this is, and no mistake, from the beginning, a point,
Thank you.
Below.
Good.
precious and frost and fire, a place where you might find a wall or a stake, or set a lamppost safely, or perhaps a gouge, not a millimeter, but the and feel its sweet edges divide you through the heart and marriage. And you will so happily conclude your moral career, be it life or death. We crave only reality, and we are really dying. Let us hear the rattle in our throats and feel cold in the extremities if we are alive. Let us go about our business.
So can someone answer that question? What does he mean by reality? Part of the answer is that which is not just appearances. First of all, what appears to be and what is may be two different things. Guys, I want you to write this down if you don't understand it. And he says you need to keep digging till you come to, the solid rock. Jesus talked about that. You live your life on sand or on a rock. And so you want to live on a rock. You want to set your feet on something that's stable and sure, not something that isn't. So that's kind of number 10. And then you can answer number 11, and we'll finish with Emma this last chapter.
Time is but the stream I go fishing in. I drink at it, but while I drink I see the sandy bottom and detect how shallow it is. Its thin current slides away, but eternity remains. I would drink deeper and fish in the sky, whose bottom is pebbly with stars. I cannot count one. I know not the first letter of the alphabet. I have always been regretting that I was not as wise as the day I was born. The intellect is a cleaver. It discerns and rips its way into secretive things. I do not wish to be any more busy with my hands than is necessary. My head is hands and feet. I feel all my best faculties concentrated in it. My instinct tells me that my head is an organ for burrowing, as some creatures use their snout and forepaws. But with it I would be mine and burrow my way through the hills. I think that the richest thing is somewhere hereabouts. So by the divining rod and thin rising vapors I judge, and here I become blind.
Thank you. So let's look at that number 12. Anybody want to try your hand in it? I've got a suggestion about it. Okay, one thing he says is that time is the stream I go fishing in. So time is where you live. And he says, I want to drink it, and I would rather drink deeper than a stream. I'd rather drink, in other words, I'd rather go fishing in the sky. Think about it. The river has a bottom. The sky does not. The sky is limitless. And so he's always thinking in terms of, I want the biggest things of life, the most important thing. I don't want to waste my time with things that are going to disappoint me. And this is all true. It's all really Christian. Doesn't make him a Christian. And that's something you're going to have to decide. But this is very much in line with what Scripture teaches. Don't settle for second best, and don't think that appearances and petty things are going to satisfy. Jesus is always talking about that. He's talking about, let's live life to its fullest. Jesus came to give abundant life. Just because we see that in this, again, doesn't make Thoreau a believer. He did go to seminary, so he knows the right answers. So before we go, look at number 11. What does it mean to live deliberately as nature, not to be thrown off the track by every nutshell and mosquito's wing that falls on the path? Yes,
Could he be trying to say, like, to focus on what's important in life and not be thrown off track by the inconsequential things?
Good, I like
I was
that.
gonna say something similar, disregard the little things and just live.
Yeah. What are we gonna say, dude? All right, so when we come in, we're not leaving yet, but when we come in Monday, we'll start this second chapter. The vocabulary is due Wednesday, and this next chapter, we'll first start by writing. So be thinking about the books that matter to you, and we'll see what he thinks. It's 8 pages long, so it's one of the shorter ones.
I go put this in my wallet real
Oh,
quick.
wait just a minute, it's about about time.
That's it.
Yeah.